of Urban One Incorporated, Radio One, or any of its subsidiary companies. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thank you once again for joining our show. I have my superstar panel, Attorney Vanita Banks and Attorney Marlon Primes, superstars in their field. Today, though, I'm bombarded. It's been one of those congested weeks. It seemed like I was in depositions every day, 14 hours a day. So it's been a long week. But throughout the week, what bothered me most was the fact that we have these crazy executive branch decisions. And I don't know if you follow the news, but the last week there was a fundamental change in travel. The Trump administration changed the process. So if you left the country, came back into the country, and the old rule was $800 in goods that you purchased in a foreign country was exempt. It was called de minimis, so you didn't have to pay tariff. Well, they changed the rule September 1st to zero. So if you go to Jamaica or China and you buy something, when you get in the United States, you say you bought something, you say, how much? $500. Well, if it's Dominican Republic, it would be $50, but if it's China, it's 35%. Well, the weird thing that happened the day before, the appellate court said that the tariffs that Trump put in place were illegal. And so I was concerned about that as you gain entry back in the United States, because I was thinking that everybody going to be interrogated. What do you buy? Well, it turns out nothing. The Border Patrol or the TSA people, nobody asked about purchases because they determined the tariff was illegal. And the reason the court said they was illegal, because if you know anything about American government, the way our Constitution works in America is that only the Congress has to pass a bill to levy a tax. And that was the premise of the Affordable Care Act. They made it a tax thing. In this case, the President of the United States, tantamount to a dictator-type regime, imposed unilateral tariffs on everybody. And so we're going to see what happens. The case will probably proceed to U.S. Supreme Court, but it's well settled what the rules are, and I'll see whether or not the Supreme Court overruled the Constitution. But in any event, my starting factor, but the big issue today is the United States economy, folks. It's a legal issue because it's going to affect all of you. The statistics this week, the Black women unemployment rate that's reported is 7.5%. And I don't know what my panel believe that. I mean, because now it appears that when the government people give accurate information, they get terminated. What do you think about that, counselors?
Well, I mean, the problem is that there's so many people that rely upon accurate data from the federal government, and it's really a big part of our economy. We have business owners, African American, white, all different races rely upon the data to make long-term decisions about who they're going to hire, what products they're going to purchase, what new initiatives. And then you have a whole group of international investors that invest in the U.S. economy. So if you can't rely upon the data, it's going to have an adverse impact on the economy. We're already seeing that in the bond market, in that, individual countries that we're trying to sell our debt to, there appears to be some reluctance to take on that debt because of just the uncertainty that we're seeing, and then the unreliability of numbers. So that makes it more difficult for all of us, because that also, increases the deficit and has an adverse impact on the economy. So it's something that I think that we really have to make sure that it should be bipartisan. The numbers should be the numbers, and an individual should not be terminated for, being accurate.
And telling the truth and relying on science, as we've heard a lot last week regarding vaccines and the incredibly firing hearing between the uh, head of the Health and Human Services Agency, Robert Kennedy, and the congressional hearing this week relative to vaccines. But staying with the economy, you know, colleagues, after years of plentiful employment opportunities, American workers, and it's just been devastating for Black women who saw decreases in their job opportunities. Over 300,000 Black women lost their employment in the last 90 days, and we've been focused on that sobering economic reality as well for a number of reasons. You saw the devastating cuts to federal government jobs have impacted Black women as well. And just the uncertainty, as Attorney Primes mentioned, with respect to these tariffs, we're also they're having an effect of employers slowing down their hiring because of the uncertainty. And then, of course, yesterday we saw the job reports, which showed that only about 22,000 jobs were added to our economy in August, and that the unemployment rate is ticking up, and it is 4.3%. And of course, it's higher in the Black community, where I think it's reaching 7.5%. And this is the highest that it's been in nearly 4 years.
Well, Council, you make an excellent point. And the only time that we had that high in unemployment was the last Trump administration during the pandemic, when it went off the chart. But the problem that I see is that we're looking towards a disaster in our national economy. And I see that we have to really write folks that send information to us. They're concerned about whether or not interest rate will be cut and things like that. But the problem here is a little bit more significant than what people realize. Our national economy, based on population trends, each month, the United States must create so many jobs for the people in the country to work. So despite the fact that they're going out rounding up 1,000 or so people per day, or whatever they are in terms of immigration, we still have a small population increase. And so for the first time under the Biden administration, at no time did he have a job loss any month. For the first time in a long time since the pandemic, we had a significant job loss in the last couple months. The United States must add, typically the United States add between 180 to 200,000 jobs each month. And I'm not sure of the exact amount we need in order to have employment goals met, but it's going to probably be somewhere between 100 to 150,000 jobs. Well, we had a net job loss in July, and so what we're heading for, in all likelihood, is a recession. And so the reason that's important is that as a consumer and a citizen, you have to prepare yourself for what might happen. As we know, in American history, a lot of people debate the issue of the Great Depression, stock market crash in 1929. Some folks said that the stock market crashed because of tariff. But everybody would agree, most of the economists will agree, that the tariff introduction extended the Great Depression. And so now we have a unilateral imposition of tariffs on countries all over the world. Even countries that didn't even have citizens got tariffs. It was hysterical watching this clown show whereby you have no methodology in terms of imposition of tariffs, right? And so now we have a situation whereby, historically speaking, tariff has not worked for the United States of America. And then, Marlon, what I'm concerned about is that the tariff money they've now collected and the court says that it's illegal. What happened to the billions of dollars that have been collected from tariff?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are out there that they're just inaccurate. And if you really look at, those that are really experienced in this area, a lot of this tariffs are going to be passed on to the customer. And the administration is making this sort of notion that, hey, these are things that are going to go to the treasury, and those are not necessarily true. The other thing that's really important, I think you make an important point about the Great Depression. There was a tendency by politicians to say, hey, if we just close our borders, that, hey, somehow the economy is going to get better. What we have to understand is that the U.S., we're only a very small percentage of the world population, 4.4%. And so we have to be able to sell products overseas in order for our economy to remain strong. So if you put up these high barriers, what's going to happen is that other countries in turn are going to put up high barriers as well, and it's going to make it more difficult for our goods to get sold. The other important thing to look at is that if you look at our customers, particularly China, China is one of the biggest producers of, not biggest producer, but just biggest purchasers of soybean. And they were purchasing 1/3 of the soybean crop. And this year they're purchasing 0. And instead they're going to Brazil. So this is hurting a lot of American farmers. There are a number of states that are indicating that farmers are going to be a large increase in terms of bankruptcy filings for farmers, and we're already seeing that. So I think people have to understand that this tariffs, given the fact that we're in a world economy, they do have adverse consequences. And we have to learn the lessons of history, as you rightly pointed out, in terms of the Great Depression in 1929.
Well, one of the problems that we have is that it's the legal uncertainty of the imposition of tariff. See, I'm not sure that the Supreme Court will follow the Constitution on this issue. The fact that the Trump administration have embedded themselves with this idea, despite the fact that it's tantamount to a clear violation of the U.S. Constitution that's been around for a long time, I'm concerned. I've been watching some of these opinions, and it just seemed like they are a little bit abnormal in terms of the overall justice system. But having said that, I'm concerned that this tariff decision may represent a departure of the American democracy if the court says that the President of the United States can unilaterally impose taxes on American citizens without the approval of Congress. Then they are themselves appointing the President of the United States as a dictator. And that's what the danger is in terms of real time. We're seeing the aberration of American democracy. This case will test the core of American democracy, because nothing is more sacrosanct than taxes in our country. We use taxes to support everything that we do. We support our highways, our roads, our military. It's entwined in American democracy. And so because of that, it's such an important function that we regulate how taxes are administered. And so I'm concerned about that. But we'll get a caller. Imhotep, how you doing today, sir?
Good morning. Pardon me. Pardon me. Good morning, Brother Nate, and to all the listeners. You start off on the razor's edge this morning. I'll be brief. I know you want to get through some things. The appeal, a couple of things real fast. We don't know what our Congress is doing. I just watched as a veteran, on any veterans list, they just took the Department of Defense name off and the Secretary of Defense name off the walls yesterday. So they're going to name Department of War. The reason why it was changed, it used to be called the Department of War, if I'm correct, Nate, right? It was called the Department of War at first. They changed the name, right? Congress did. So our Congress is letting a president, a 34 felon, convicted felon president, just do what he wants to do. They're abdicating their responsibility. Mike Johnson and them are abdicating their responsibility because he doesn't have the power to change things, yet they wouldn't change the name. That's supposed to be done by act of Congress, and it's not. Maybe it's telltale that he is going to be a Putin clone and create war, because we still don't know the identity of those people on the ship that you attacked in international waters.
That's right.
They have to enter United States waters, and then you have to suspect them of something, and then you take them in, and they go through due process. In international waters, I don't know. I've never seen that you can just shoot a ship. If that's the case, everybody's going to shoot people in international waters. If that's the case, the ruling again about the tariffs.
Well,
And,
I am gonna tell you. You know what my concern is that when you attack whether drug dealers or malcontents or whatever they are, they're not going to just die and give up. They're going to retaliate, and that's what my concern would be, is that how do you protect American citizen abroad or even our country if you start just randomly killing people, and nobody knows whether or not this valid or not.
Yeah, and we know we can't trust and believe anything this administration says. And then Pete Hegseth makes the statement saying, Trump rather, we've been operating from defense, and we could have won all the wars, but we were too defensive and too wokey. The United States murdered 2 million Vietnamese, along with over 300,000 Laotians, Cambodians, along with that. Over 65,000 American troops died. I think Vietnam War claimed more American troops than the Revolutionary War, World War I and World War II combined at the time, Korean War at the time. I don't know what he's talking about. We have a leadership, a rudderless leadership, and to claim you want a Nobel Prize, yet you want to be this champion of war, that's a conundrum. That's definitely a contradiction. But these tariffs ruling, now he's going to the Supreme Court on this ruling. We'll see what that happens. And then the jobs report that came out yesterday, pitiful. Even the adjusted jobs report from June, July was even worse than what he first thought. But this yesterday's report was completely horrible. And I think I mentioned it last week, or maybe you did, that for the first time in 60 years, college graduates have a higher unemployment rate than the regular citizens. There's a fundamental issue going on with the economy. 22,000 jobs. I mean, that's not even counting. That's not the high school graduates in a small city. So it befuddles me that we're sitting here and we're letting a person and who thinks he knows everything, doesn't know anything. He keeps wanting to blame Biden. And if you all, your Bobs and everybody who support this man, you see the three things: either you're completely clueless, either you're racist, or either you are one of the ones that they are, a pedophile, or you have these characteristics of this particular gentleman. Because there's no way in the world you could support a person who does these things. 22,000 jobs, people, that is nothing. You know how many college graduates you probably had in June, July, let alone high school graduates, maybe other folks that's still out of the workforce looking for work. We're talking about 22,000 jobs? What do you make of that, Nate? It's really a rudderless ship we have, and we have DEI for white men. Gwen Eiffel's daughter, Cheryl Eiffel, I read her stuff on Threads. Very good juror. I think she's an attorney too by trade. And Cheryl Eiffel talks about this is DEI for white men. And we've seen it play out. There's no way in the world President Obama could have got away with this. Bill Clinton didn't do this. Bill Clinton had one of the strongest economies in history at that time. He created 22 million jobs during his presidency. 22 million. I think Biden created what, 13, 14 million? and we had 22,000 for a month. What do you think of that, Nate? Thanks for taking my call.
Well, you got to remember, Clinton served for 2 terms and Biden only served for 1 term. But Biden had the greatest job growth of any president during my lifetime. Don't forget that, but the second thing is that you said something interesting about Vietnam. The sad thing about the 58,000 troops that died in Vietnam, when I was in law school, we had like the Secretary of Defense or someone came to her and they were talking about the casualty in Vietnam. And much to my chagrin, I learned that about half of the soldiers killed in Vietnam were African American. And so that was shocking. We're only a small percentage of the population. But in any event, that was a good point. Now, next caller, Ms. Avery, you have a question for us?
I'm glad you used my last name, Nathaniel Lee. My question is, with the different, can you hear me?
Yes.
You handled my divorce, and then it seems like whoever the individual that was representing my husband, now y'all in league. And then now, this is Local 481. We're going to call everybody out because I got no shame in my game. You know me, don't you?
If you have a legal matter, we don't discuss.
No, it ain't a legal matter. It's just an issue with things that are going on in my community and my neighborhood. And I'm 65 and can't get none of the monies that you have now. I'm not sure of your affiliation, but I'm not trying to be argumentative either. But it just seems to be nefarious on your associations, Mr. Lee. Thank you.
Okay.
You know my last name.
Yeah, but in any event, I have no idea what that's about. But now the other thing, though, as we head into a recession, there's some things that are important that we need to talk about. Now, a recession in America is defined by economists as 2 consecutive quarters of declining gross domestic product. So we're in a declining domestic product situation now, but what do you do if you head towards a recession? We've lived through a couple of these, and during my lifetime, it's happened under the Republican regime. But what you have to do, the major impact of recession is employment. So job losses typically surge during recessions. And we're seeing that with unemployment rates climbing significantly. And that is a result of business cutting costs by reducing their workforce, and they have hiring freezes, and that become common across industry. Now, the problem with recessions is that you can't determine which businesses a lot of time are adversely affected. Like, for example, if interest rates are high, it will adversely affect new home ownership. But if new home ownership become unaffordable, then rental rates increase. And so it's just a vicious cycle. And then the second part is that consumer spending in a recession decline. And when people stop spending money, it has a negative impact on everything else you do. People lose their job in those industries where they spent money because you need less employment if you have less foot traffic. The third thing, of course, you have massive business failures. A lot of the big corporations start cutting back. Then you see bankruptcies increase. When the bankruptcies start increasing, what occurs is that creditors who had a stake, they lose the revenue, and then they become adversely impacted. And so, in the fourth item, of course, investment. Investment declines. And so when investment declines, you have the inability to raise capital a lot of time to start new business ventures. So how do you prepare for recession? Now, what do you need to do? Well, the number one thing you have to do is start with emergency funding to cover you from at least 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. Try to get rid of your high interest debt like credit cards, since interest rates during recessions oftentimes remain elevated. So in other words, when we have a recession, interest rates generally don't get lower. They stay the same or get higher because people are needing to borrow more money. And because people want to borrow more money, the flow of capital decreases. And because of that, interest rate don't go down, it goes up. And so you need to try to eliminate debts as best as possible, particularly with credit cards. Credit card is a dangerous item to have in your financial picture if you head into a recession. Now, the second thing, though, you have to strengthen your employment position. Update your resume if you're still employed. Look at the trends. Try to make sure that there's not a lot you can do if you work for a corporation. They decide to lay off. You take some type of package. So, but you have to make sure that you have your resume in place. If that occurs, you could transition to an alternative employment. Now, in terms of investment, when you have a market downturn, if you save money up when stocks go way down, that's a good time to put money in the market because it always goes back up. So no matter what time you identify in American history, stocks have always rebounded at some point in the future. But in order for you to benefit from the American economy rebounding, you have to have cash stored away in order to plant it in some investment, such as an index fund. And so if you had like $10,000, for example, and you were able to put the money into an index fund, at any time, traditionally, they will have a return of a good return somewhere between 6 to 15%. And that's important. Now, the other thing you have to do in preparation for a recession is housing. If you are living in an apartment, it's always better to buy your own home because when you buy, historically, homes themselves increase in value, typically in most areas about 8%. And so, but if you live in an apartment, you can live there for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, pay rent every month. You miss a couple months, they kick you out. You have no equity, no ownership, and you're out on the street. So whenever possible, I urge you to try to acquire home ownership. And but if you own a home, look at interest rates each month to see whether or not the interest rates that are available is lower than your mortgage rate. If you got homes during the pandemic, those interest rates were down to 2, 3, 4%. But eventually, the way the economy is headed, the interest rate, I suspect, will decrease at some point in time. I'm not sure when, but it should. I don't think they're going to stay this high because we have a lot of economic factors that just are not trending good. And the next thing is that make sure that you have health insurance and take advantage now of the preventative care. Make sure you do your checkups. And if you use your deductible, try to make sure you get all your free treatment in right away. So these are some of the common things you could do. And if you have a retirement fund, try to tuck as much money away into that as possible so that if the economy really goes bad, that you have some cash. So that's some of the general things that off the top of my head, I think you should do, because I think that whether you agree or not, I think we're headed towards a recession at some point because the history of our country when we've seen the imposition of tariff, the net effect of that has been a downturn in the American economy. And I suspect that we're going to see a continuation of this job loss based on these current policies. And I call like Renee, I know that one of the reasons why we had such a dramatic increase in Black women unemployment was the federal government massive layoff, the layoff of federal employees without any strategy or any legitimate purpose. They just started laying people off, even though they were essential workers. And so now we have this massive process where we have all these African American women who have high education, high skill set that are unemployed. It's a terrible thing to happen to any sector in our community, particularly in the Black community, because a large percentage of households in the Black community are headed by Black women. So that's my
so true
summary
in
of
Black.
that, Council, in a nutshell.
Excellent summary, Attorney Lee. And Black women, you know, the impact has just been devastating. And and our caller Renee had mentioned in the chat, she was wondering what we thought Powell might do with respect to the interest rate. And I was thinking that, you know, an interest rate cut, even a small one, could, you know, help, you know, unleash some of this pent up demand we saw at the end of last year after the election, that hiring and investment picked up. And so did just general overall uh, sentiment, because at that point it seemed like inflation was, you know, appearing to be getting tamed. But of course, all that was squandered when these tariffs started to be imposed, and that possibility of inflation got introduced. And so that began to result in what we're seeing currently. And another thing that Renee was saying, and we had a whole segment on tariffs, and maybe we should host another one, Attorney Lee, that, you know, tariffs, understand, listening audience, are taxes. And those taxes are passed on to you, citizens, as they're passed down to you, you know, as taxpayers. And so make no mistake about it, when you hear the word tariffs, that means taxes. And those taxes are borne by the American public.
And you know what's incredible is that when you travel, I had a personal story. One year we went to Mexico, and when we were headed down there, coincidentally, there was a manager of these performing artists, and he had Attorney Bex, he had these two computers, right? Two laptop type computers, and he was a highly educated guy. And so we're going through his line, and the soldier or the representative of the Mexican government asked me, "Sir, what is the value of the items in your bag?" My response, zero. So what do you mean? I said, it has no value. It's all giveaway stuff, right? And what was funny is that the entertainment manager, he said, "Oh, I got the latest technology, got to download all the music. Oh, this unit sells for about $6,000 a laptop, a very expensive, blah, 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 software." I'm thinking, $6,000. And not realizing that if the United States imposed tariffs on Mexico, they will retaliate by imposing tariffs on America. So when he was going to the country, then all of a sudden they want to charge him 10% of the value of his second computer, which would have been $600 because he said it's $6,000.
Wow.
And I was kind of laughing to myself, thinking, why would he say that the value of this freaking computer when they're only asking him to value something for a reason? I guess he can figure it out. But the point I'm making is we had the same situation that was likely to occur just as of September 1st, during the banks. It was kind of funny because I was worried about, we go to a foreign country now, and if we still have the imposition of tariffs and things like that, then you come back in the United States, you as a citizen will have to then declare the value of the thing you bought in a foreign country. And then, depending on the country, it could be as low as 10% or high as, I'm not sure what China, I think it was 35%. I don't remember, but it was depending on the country you're in. Even the country that had the penguins, I think they were 10%. So it's hard to know, Okay, we'll go to our next caller. Caller, you have a question coming for us today.
This is Pierre.
Hey, how you doing, Pierre? How you doing today, sir?
Oh, okay. To your point about government workers being fired, here locally, as you know, Nate, I don't sit on my rights. I file complaints at the National Labor Relations Board or in court or whatever if I think my rights have been violated. But I had some complaints before or some charges before the National Labor Relations Board here in town. And I had a representative on it, and the guy was pretty sharp. And I noticed that he hasn't been calling me back. Now, I know he was a new employee down there, and he's probably been let go. And, the National Labor Relations Board here in town, I'm quite sure across the country, they're just not working. I don't know what they're doing. The EEOC, I don't know what this government is broken.
Hey, Pierre, the one thing you need to know, you mentioned the EEOC. Remember, the Trump administration, they basically did some type of edict or notion that they're not interested in doing civil rights claim as it relates to Black folks. They're trying to look at reverse discrimination of whites or diversity type initiative. So they're doing just the opposite of what the civil rights protocol was set up for. And so they wouldn't be doing things to represent your interests anyway.
Right. I think these agency heads are they got the message, and they're just not going to do anything. They're not going to issue any charges against any businesses or any unfair labor practices against businesses, no matter how valid the charge is. We've got, and then I heard a story on NPR where attorneys, they can't keep or get attorneys to help in, prisoner cases. I know you've got the federal public defenders, but I mean, there's another group of attorneys that have been asked to volunteer, but they're not getting paid. The fund to pay them is gone, and it's not being replenished. So, I don't know. This government is just stopped working. And the last point I wanted to get your opinion on, Lisa Cook, you brought up the Fed. Is the Supreme Court, do you think she'll get her job back, or she'll be put back on the board? And to Prime, does he have cause to fire her or get rid of her? And I'll listen. Thank you for taking my call, Nate.
Well, I didn't totally follow that case because if you live in this country and watch the news, every day there is a distraction by the Trump administration to avoid the evidence in the Epstein case. In that case, when Elon Musk got upset with Trump, he produced these photographs of Trump with these teenage girls. And so this evidence has been at the forefront of what would be some of the worst sexual misconduct cases ever.
Hey,
We took these teenage girls and it was just terrible. I watched some of the victims talk about this as to what happened to them, and it's very sad. But it seemed like to me that a lot of things that we do, as soon as some of that leak out, then we see some crazy adverse effect to divert attention away.
I wasn't talking about Jeffrey Epstein. I was talking about Lisa Cook. You haven't followed that case?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that the Lisa Cook situation, I thought was a distraction from the Epstein. All these things about invading these cities with tanks and soldiers and all this crazy stuff. Every time the conservative people in the radio show start bringing it up, then you see some drastic action. Well, clearly, the president of the United States don't have the legal authority to terminate the person on the Fed. It's a constitutional appointment that's supposed to, when Biden was in office, you got to remember the guy who's over the Federal Reserve was appointed by Trump. So when Biden took office, he has a 10-year term. And so you serve that, and you, in order to be removed, generally you have to take an act of Congress or something. But so I'm not, in American history, I've not known any prior president that removed somebody from the Federal Reserve. I just not seen that during my lifetime.
Totally independent agency, and the president has no authority to remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. And so she's filed a lawsuit to retain her position. And his attempt to fire her is based on a referral letter, which is, again, is common. He's going after anybody that he can. But his goal is to totally reshape the Federal Reserve Board, or he wants to reshape the whole balance of the Federal Reserve central banking system, which could have a devastating effect, on our economy. And this is just a guise that he's using in order to do that,
well,
asserting that for cause, he's firing her based on some applications for
her mortgage.
mortgages in connection with 2 homes that she owns. And this sounds reminiscent of the attacks against Marilyn Mosby, Attorney Lee.
Mm-hmm. Final question. Is she on the board now, or is she not on the board?
She is currently on the board, yes.
Okay.
And also the Republican senators, as publicly stated, they say that the Republican Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota stated she is still in the position. She has not had due process yet. So he's on the Judicial Appointment Committee. And so the Republicans also, Tom Tillis, North Carolina senator, said that he's not going to consider anybody to be appointed until her issue is fully adjudicated. And so what would happen is that she's filed a lawsuit and go through the legal process. So as far as I know, she's still in position, and which is what is required under our Constitution. And based on what I've seen, he doesn't have the legal authority to do what he's trying to do. But none of the stuff that the president been doing lately, in my mind, is constitutional. So we're in troubled waters now as we relate to American democracy. And as I said earlier, this tariffs issue will be a defining moment in American democracy. If the Congress allows for President of the United States to unilaterally, by himself, impose taxes on American citizens, and that's what a tariff is, then we've now surrendered ourselves from democracy to a dictatorship. And that's how serious this is. But
Subpoenas and 2 investigations have been opened in connection with Lisa Cook's case, and he's purporting to terminate her for cause. And of course, that's being actively challenged in court. But she's alleged to have falsified bank documents and property records to acquire more favorable loan terms, potentially committing mortgage fraud under the federal, statute. And again, we saw this type of allegations brought against Marilyn Mosby, who before now was the only person that we're aware of in this country that was prosecuted for, taking a loan against her own 401k funds.
yeah, I had a great deal of difficulty digesting that. And it seemed like to me, counsel, that she was a target. But then across the country, we've seen a rise in Black women being chief prosecutors down in Orlando, Atlanta, Missouri.
Chicago.
Yeah. And there's a common denominator. It appears to me that they become targets and they are attacked. And the one in Florida and Orlando, for example, the governor decided to remove her and then she wins re-election. We saw that, all across the country. They went after Fannie Willis down in Atlanta. And she ended up winning a re-election by such a high landslide. And they did everything possible to try to remove her. And God knows, I don't understand this process down in Atlanta, Attorney Banks. It never made any sense to me. This whole thing, this defense about her having a relationship with a co-worker and, the fact that he get paid a salary or money, I just didn't get that as to why it was such a big deal. They were on the same side, and it just bothered me that they were attacking her. And so net result is that it seemed like it's part of an overall scheme. See, if you listen to, I've seen a lot of very intelligent commentators, both Caucasian and African Americans, and they talk about this current climate, right? And the one thing that I've been seeing over and over again, and they were talking about this attack this attack that seemed on African America, and it seemed like the country is becoming more racist. I don't think that's the case. As I agree with these commentators, that is that what we're seeing happen is that the current administration give people permission to publicly reveal that they're racist and not be embarrassed. And so we're seeing a moral decline in terms of how we treat other human beings in our country. And it's not just this immigration thing, Attorney Banks, but this constant attack on affirmative action, DEI, and things like that. And now we've seen this rapid decline in African American and professional schools and things like that. So what we have to do is go back to the foundation that I talked about earlier. You have to start planning harder now for the upcoming recession. And of course, as we say every week, we got to go out and work like we never worked before and make sure we win in the midterms, the election. And so if we could win the House and the Senate in the midterm, I think we could start attacking this crazy misconduct that we're seeing every day. So the things that our callers are calling about, whether or not this is correct, well, no, none of this stuff is correct. none of this follow basic constitutional democracy. And we've seen it before when Trump lost the election. And then uh, did you see what happened to these lawyers filed these baseless lawsuits? They got sanctioned, suspended, or disbarred. And so the things we're seeing occurring now, there will be consequences at some point in the future, I predict.
Absolutely. We're seeing the consequences now. And, we're past the point of a constitutional crisis, and we're moving into a period of authoritarianism. When you have a president that says um, that he can do whatever he wants, right? And that we don't have to have any more elections. And we're seeing, as you mentioned, Attorney Lee, black female prosecutors being targeted across the country, as well as uh, black mayors across the country as well. We're bracing here in Chicago for and preparing to fight back against a possible um, and potential and probable deployment of troops in the National Guard here in Chicago. These efforts are being staged in North Chicago at the Great Lakes Naval Base. That's a staging location for the ICE operation. And our Representative Snyder and Senators Tammy Duckworth and Senator Durbin, they visited the Great Lakes Naval Base seeking information from the Department of Homeland Security and were told that they weren't available. So it's just unconscionable, unconstitutional, illegal to have federal troops descend on Chicago like they descended in DC, although there's more authority for DC and LA. And we heard, from the judge in LA this week, or in California, that um the placement of the National Guard in California is illegal and violative of the uh, is it the Comitas Act? I'm not going to pronounce it
Casa
correctly.
Comitatus.
The Comitatus Act. But again, our elected officials, they visited this Great Lakes Naval Base, which is about 35 miles north of Chicago. And even the attempt to use the naval base is illegal. And this is a similar operation that appears that they're planning um, that took place in California or in LA this summer. And do you know that occupation of LA cost taxpayers $140 million? It's outrageous. It makes absolutely no sense. There's no emergency here in Chicago, and those federal funds should be used, Attorney Lee, to stop the flow of illegal guns that are coming in to Illinois and Chicago from Indiana and other cities across the nation. And we've seen, funds up to $800 million in funds uh, withheld from Illinois that could be used and had been used for making investments in affordable housing, investments in youth jobs, investments in uh, police community collaboration reform efforts. So this is really a guise to the guise is fighting crime, right? Although we've seen in these American cities that crime is down, but one person being a victim of crime, of course, is too many and is devastating um, for the families and communities. But this is not the way to accomplish um, crime. Cities are already engaged in efforts that are working, and and those efforts should be continued, applauded, and coordinated with the federal government.
Well, thank you so much for that comment. And thank you, our listening audience, for your participation and your questioning and your comments. And join us next week as we deal with new legal issues of the day. And thank you, everybody. Have a safe weekend. Take care.
Thank you. Have a blessed week.